They say betrayal never comes from your enemies. It comes from the people who smile across the table while plotting your downfall. I used to believe that phrase belonged to stories, not to my life. But that was before my retirement party, before the toast, the glass, and the look in my daughter-in-law's eyes that told me I was no longer just a mother-in-law. I was an obstacle. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and for 40 years, I worked as a nurse in the same hospital where I gave birth to my only son. I watched life begin and end every day, and I thought that gave me wisdom. A sixth sense for danger, dishonesty, deceit. But the truth is, love blinds even the most watchful. When I retired, I thought I had everything a woman could hope for: a modest home, a good pension, and a son, Daniel, who'd grown into the kind of man every mother dreams of raising. Kind, hardworking, patient, the type who carried groceries for neighbors and brought flowers for no reason. When he married Sabrina, I thought he'd found his match. She was beautiful, educated, well-mannered. The kind of woman who smiled with her lips more than her eyes. At first, I ignored the small things. The way she corrected Daniel mid-sentence, or rolled her eyes when I offered advice. I told myself it was adjustment, that every marriage finds its rhythm. But as years passed, the rhythm turned sharp. Phone calls became shorter, visits rarer. My son's voice carried a new distance, soft but strained, like someone caught between loyalty and love. Then came the retirement announcement. My hospital planned a celebration, a small gathering in the courtyard with balloons, speeches, and co-workers who'd aged beside me. Daniel insisted we host a dinner afterward at my favorite restaurant, the Willow Room, a quiet place with white tablecloths and soft jazz. "You deserve a night to remember, Mom," he said. I smiled. "As long as you're there, it will be." Sabrina chimed in from behind him, voice sweet as syrup. "Oh, I'll handle all the details. You just relax." Something in her tone made me uneasy. It wasn't what she said. It was what lingered beneath, like perfume masking smoke. The week leading up to the party was a whirlwind of cards, hugs, and bittersweet farewells. My coworkers gifted me a gold watch, engraved with the words, "For every heartbeat you've healed." I cried, hugged them each, and thought how strange it was to say goodbye to a place that had been my second home. Saturday arrived bright and warm, sunlight spilling across my kitchen as I dressed in a soft blue dress and pinned on my favorite brooch. A silver heart Daniel gave me on his 10th birthday. The restaurant glowed with candles and laughter when I arrived. Familiar faces greeted me. Colleagues, family, even old patients who'd heard the news. Sabrina greeted me first, her red dress shimmering like firelight. "Eleanor," she said, arms open, smile wide. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, dear," I replied, hugging her lightly. Her perfume, something floral with a bitter note, clung to my skin. Daniel kissed my cheek. "Mom, this is your night. Enjoy it." Dinner passed in warmth and chatter. Stories were shared. The time I delivered a baby in the hospital elevator, the night a power outage forced me to stitch wounds by flashlight. People laughed, clapped, toasted. For a moment I forgot the unease curling at the edge of my thoughts. Then came dessert and the toast. Sabrina rose, glass in hand, her voice smooth and practiced. "To Eleanor," she began, "a woman who's dedicated her life to helping others. Tonight we celebrate not just her career, but her kindness, her strength, and her legacy." Something flickered in her eyes as she said that last word, legacy. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw triumph, not affection. She lifted her glass toward me. "To new beginnings." Everyone echoed the words. Glasses clinked. I reached for mine, but paused. The glass before me was filled with champagne, identical to the others. Yet, as Sabrina leaned closer to set hers down, I noticed her hand, trembling slightly, and a faint residue clinging to the rim of my glass, like the ghost of a fingerprint dusted in powder. My instincts, honed by decades of watching life teeter between breath and silence, screamed. Sabrina sat, her gaze flicking to my glass, then away too quickly. I smiled. "What a lovely speech, dear. Let me return the toast." She blinked, startled. "Oh, of course." I stood lifting the glass. "To family," I said, voice steady. "And to the surprises life still has in store." Then, as casually as flipping a page, I reached across the table and exchanged our glasses. Sabrina's eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second. A flash of panic she tried to swallow with a smile. "To family," she echoed, voice thin. Around us, laughter resumed. Forks scraped plates, music swelled, and I watched her drink. The evening carried on, but I barely heard the chatter. My heart thudded like a drum under my ribs. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind, paranoid from years of hospital shifts and exhaustion? Or had I just intercepted something far darker than resentment? When dessert arrived, Sabrina excused herself, claiming a headache. Daniel followed, concerned. I stayed, forcing smiles, thanking guests, my mind spiraling through possibilities. Poison? Sedative? Allergen? The nurse in me catalogued symptoms even as the mother in me prayed I was wrong. Outside, I found Daniel near their car, Sabrina leaning against the door, pale and sweating. "Mom," he said, voice strained. "Sabrina's not feeling well. Maybe something she ate." I stepped closer, scanning her face, pupils dilated, lips tinged faintly blue. Not food poisoning, not anxiety, something chemical. "I'll call an ambulance," I said. Sabrina's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "No," she rasped. "No hospital." Daniel looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" I met her eyes, and saw it. The truth, raw and wordless. She knew. She knew what had been in that glass. I turned to Daniel, voice steady. "Son, take her home. Make her drink water. If she gets worse, you call me. Do you understand?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. Thanks, Mom." They drove off into the night, taillights fading. I stood in the parking lot, clutching my purse, shaking from something colder than fear. Disappointment. Back home, I sat by the window, moonlight pooling across my kitchen table. I replayed the moment again and again, the residue, the switch, the panic. I wanted to believe I was mistaken, that exhaustion had conjured a nightmare from shadows. But deep down, I knew. The next morning, Daniel called. "Mom, she's fine. Must have been a reaction to the seafood. She's resting." Seafood. The restaurant hadn't served any. I hung up, heart sinking. The following week, Sabrina dropped by unannounced, a bouquet in hand. Roses, white not red. Sympathy, not celebration. "I wanted to apologize," she said, stepping into my living room uninvited. "For leaving early. I wasn't feeling well." I folded my arms. "So I heard." She set the flowers on the table, eyes darting. "It was a lovely evening, though. You looked radiant." Her tone dripped with something I couldn't name. Guilt? Sarcasm? Fear? "Tell me, Sabrina," I said softly. "When you raised that glass, what did you mean by legacy?" She froze. I just meant your career, your..." "Legacy implies something left behind," I interrupted. "A will, an inheritance, something worth waiting for." Her face flushed. "Are you accusing me of something?" I leaned in, meeting her gaze. "Should I be?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, she forced a laugh. "You've been under a lot of stress, Eleanor. Retirement can do that to people." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You should rest, you know. People your age need to be careful." The words hung heavy, half threat, half mockery. After she left, I sat for a long time, the scent of roses filling the room. I thought of Daniel. Sweet, oblivious Daniel. And the woman who now shared his bed, his table, his future. If she wanted my legacy, she'd have to go through me, and I was far from finished living. Over the next few days, I began watching. Quietly, patiently. Sabrina's visits grew frequent, always with that same sweet smile, always insisting on tea, on helping with chores. I started saving the cups, the napkins, the bottles. Old habits die hard, and a nurse never ignores evidence. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, I noticed a faint scratch on the rim of my teacup. Fresh, deliberate. I lifted it to the light. There, almost invisible, a fine white residue caught the sun. She hadn't given up. That night, I locked the cup in a plastic bag, labeled and dated, then tucked it in my freezer. If she wanted a game, she'd chosen the wrong opponent, because I had spent 40 years learning how to save lives. And now, I was about to learn how to protect mine. But before I could act, I needed proof. Undeniable. Irrefutable. And for that, I'd need help. The next morning, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Detective Harris, an old friend from the hospital days, now retired but sharp as ever. "Harris," I said, voice low. "I think someone's trying to kill me." A pause. Then, calm and certain. "Tell me everything." And I did. Every detail, every glass, every residue. He listened, silent, then said, "Don't confront her again. Collect samples. Keep records. We'll set a trap." A trap. It was strange how quickly fear could become resolve. Because now, the game had changed. And this time, I wasn't the prey. I was the one holding the glass. Detective Harris arrived 2 mornings later, his car humming quietly outside my driveway at dawn. He was older now, gray hair trimmed short, lines deepening around his eyes. But the look he gave me was the same one I'd seen 100 times in hospital corridors, focused, calculating, patient. "You look like hell, Eleanor," he said gently as I let him in. He set down a small case, unlatched it, and began removing tools, swabs, gloves, vials, a portable UV light. "Let's see what she's been up to." I retrieved the bag from the freezer, the teacup sealed in plastic, labeled with date and time. Harris examined it under the light. The faint residue glowed pale blue. He scraped a sample, sealed it, and nodded. "We'll send this to a lab I trust. Discreet, quick turnaround. If it's poison, we'll know soon." I exhaled slowly, tension leaking from my chest. "Thank you." I saw her hand shake Harris, the residue on the glass, the look in her eyes when I switched them. He nodded. "Okay, then we build the case quietly. No confrontation, no accusations. Let her think you're clueless. The more confident she feels, the sloppier she'll get." I smiled faintly. 40 years in triage, and I've never seen poison administered through pride. Harris chuckled. Over the next few days, I lived as though nothing had changed. I attended church, grocery shopped, tended my small garden. When Daniel and Sabrina visited, I greeted them with hugs and cookies, hiding the tremor in my hands behind a practiced smile. Sabrina had grown bolder. She insisted on pouring drinks, plating meals, bringing desserts, every gesture perfectly innocent, perfectly rehearsed. But I saw it now. The glint in her eyes when I lifted a glass, the subtle sigh when I set it aside untouched. She was testing me, waiting. "Hospital-grade supply," he said. "You still got access from your old job?" He sighed. "Then we've got motive and means. Now we need proof of intent." That night, I pulled out my file cabinet, the one containing insurance forms, pension statements, property deeds. Among them, my will. I unfolded the document, reading each line carefully. Daniel, sole beneficiary. In the event of his passing, Assets would transfer to his spouse. I stared at that clause until the words blurred. I closed the folder, fingers trembling. He hesitated. Of course, Mrs. Hayes. Shall I schedule an appointment? By noon, the papers were signed. My assets would now pass into a charitable trust in Daniel's name, not his possession. If I died, he'd control none of it, not until Ava, their daughter, turned 18. When I sealed the envelope, a weight lifted from my chest. 2 evenings later, Daniel and Sabrina arrived unannounced. Daniel carried wine. Sabrina, her usual bouquet of apologies disguised as politeness. Mom, we thought we'd stop by for dinner, he said cheerfully. Sabrina followed me into the kitchen, her heels tapping sharp rhythms on the tile. You've been quiet lately, she said. Just enjoying retirement, I answered, slicing vegetables. Gives one time to reflect. The knife paused mid-chop. I looked up slowly. Her reflection in the window revealed a flicker of unease. You've mentioned that word before, I said lightly. You seem fond of it. She forced a smile. We all think about the future, don't we? Of course, I murmured, though I find the present more alive. She blinked, uncertain whether I meant the words. Over dinner, she poured wine. 2 glasses, one slightly fuller. I noticed. So did Harris, who, unbeknownst to them, sat in a sedan across the street, watching through binoculars. We'd planned this night carefully. I lifted my glass, swirled it gently, then set it down untouched. Daniel, I said, tell me about work. You mentioned a promotion? He smiled, launching into stories of new projects, deadlines, the chaos of middle management. Sabrina listened, distracted, her gaze flicking toward my glass again and again. When dinner ended, Daniel stepped outside to take a call. Sabrina began clearing plates. Lovely evening, she said softly. It was, I agreed. You've become quite the hostess. She laughed lightly, but the sound rang hollow. I do what I can. Our eyes met across the table. For a heartbeat, the air between us thickened. Then she reached for my glass and froze when I covered it with my hand. I'll handle the dishes, I said. Her fingers tightened on the stem, then released. Of course. After they left, Harris stepped inside, gloves on. You sure about this? Yes, I said, handing him the glass. She was careful tonight, but habit's hard to hide. He nodded, sealing it in evidence wrap. We'll compare residues. If it matches the last sample, we've got her. 3 days later, he called. Same compound. Higher concentration. She's escalating, Eleanor. I sank into my armchair, heart heavy. What now? Now, he said, we make it official. I'll contact a friend at the precinct, but you need to prepare yourself. She won't go quietly. Once she knows we're onto her, she'll panic. Panic makes people dangerous. That evening, I double-locked every door, checked every window. Sleep came in restless fits. Each creak of the house sent my pulse racing. At dawn, I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun crawl over the street. Across the way, a car idled. Black sedan, tinted windows. I dialed Harris. They're watching. He arrived within minutes, scanning the street. She's got someone following you, he muttered. Likely private muscle, not professionals. Why? Because she knows something's wrong. She's sniffing for leaks. I smiled grimly. Then, let her find one. We decided to feed her what she wanted. Fear. The next day, I called Daniel. Sweetheart, could you and Sabrina come by tomorrow? I'd like to discuss my estate. I've been thinking about the future. He sounded surprised. Of course, Mom. Is everything okay? Perfectly, I said, smiling into the phone. I just want to make sure everything's in order. When they arrived, Sabrina's eyes gleamed, curiosity veiled as concern. "Estate planning?" she asked, slipping off her coat. "Just paperwork," I said, leading them into the living room. "I've made a few updates." I handed Daniel a sealed envelope. "This is for you to open when the time comes. My lawyer has a copy." He frowned. "You're not sick, are you?" I laughed softly. "Just thorough." Sabrina leaned forward, pretending interest. "It's good you're thinking ahead. You never know when life surprises you," I finished, meeting her gaze. Her smile faltered. After they left, Harris emerged from the study where he'd been recording. "You saw that, right? The slip. The way she froze when you mentioned surprises." "I saw," I said. "She's unraveling." The next morning my phone rang. Private number. "You think you're clever," a voice hissed. "Sabrina's. But you don't know what you've started." I remained silent. "I know about the will," she spat. "You think changing it makes you safe? You think I won't find another way?" Click. I set the phone down, pulse steady. Now I knew the truth. She wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. Whatever she'd planned was unraveling faster than she could mend it. And desperate people make mistakes. That afternoon, Harris arranged a meeting with his contact, Detective Shaw. A younger man, sharp suit, sharper instincts. He reviewed the evidence, lab reports, recordings, notes, and nodded. "We'll move carefully. No arrests yet. We need her attempting contact again. Catch her in the act." "So we wait," I said. 2 nights later, as rain whispered against the windows, I heard the faint click of the back door. My heart froze. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, moving through the dark. I reached for the phone, dialing Harris with trembling fingers. "She's here," I whispered. I crept toward the hallway, every creak beneath my feet a thunderclap. The kitchen light flicked on. Sabrina stood by the counter, dressed in black, a vial in her hand. She turned and froze when she saw me. "Funny," I said softly. I could say the same. The door burst open. Harris and Shaw flooded in, guns drawn. "Drop it!" She hesitated, then hurled the vial across the room. It shattered, liquid sizzling on tile. Harris grabbed her wrist, twisting, cuffing. "You're done, lady," Sabrina screamed, struggling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You can't prove anything." As they led her away, she turned, eyes blazing. "You ruined everything." But inside me, storm clouds still gathered. Because even as the sirens faded, one question echoed. Had she acted alone? Now, the truth was mine to uncover. The morning after Sabrina's arrest, silence filled the house like a lingering shadow. Every tick of the clock echoed through empty rooms that had once hosted laughter, arguments, holidays, and secrets. I should have felt peace, relief, something resembling victory. But what settled in my chest was colder, heavier. Because I knew what the detectives didn't. This story wasn't finished. Sabrina had always been cunning, yes, but never brilliant. She didn't have the patience or precision to orchestrate something this elaborate alone. She had help. Someone whispered in her ear, guided her hand, and convinced her she could get away with murder, and I intended to find out who. Harris called mid-morning, his voice steady, measured. "We've got her in custody. She's refusing to talk, asking for a lawyer. But I've seen her type before. Give her a few days behind concrete and steel. She'll start singing." I sighed, watching sunlight crawl across the table where she'd once poured me tea laced with death. "Don't wait too long," I said. "The longer she sits, the more time whoever helped her has to cover their tracks." "We're watching Daniel, too," Harris added gently, and my heart clenched. "Routine check, Eleanor. I know it's hard, but we can't rule anyone out." "He's my son," I whispered. "He's her husband," he reminded. After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen, hands clasped, memories swirling like ghosts. Daniel as a boy, laughing, his small hand gripping mine. Daniel as a man, eyes clouded with ambition, slipping further from the warmth he'd once known. I wanted to believe he was innocent. I needed to. But needing something doesn't make it true. That evening, the phone rang again. Harris. We pulled Sabrina's phone records. She's been in regular contact with a number I traced to an investment firm, one you might recognize. Hayes and Crane Financial. My blood ran cold. That's Daniel's company. Exactly. He hesitated. There's more. We found encrypted emails linking her cousin's hospital access to supply orders she never made. Someone financed those purchases through an offshore account. The account belongs to your son. The world tilted. No, I breathed. He wouldn't. Eleanor, I'm sorry, but it looks like Daniel's deeper in this than we thought. I hung up before my voice could betray me. The house seemed to close in, walls whispering questions I didn't want answered. Could he? Would he? Was his love genuine or another performance rehearsed between board meetings and bank statements? Sleep never came that night. I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon until dawn bled across the sky. When the first rays touched the garden, I knew what I had to do. I drove to Daniel's office unannounced. The receptionist, startled by the sight of me, a silver-haired woman in a tailored coat, eyes sharper than any scalpel, stammered before ushering me toward his door. Daniel looked up from behind his mahogany desk, surprise flickering into unease. Mom, what are you doing here? I closed the door softly. We need to talk. He gestured to a chair, forcing a smile. If this is about Sabrina, the police, it's about you. He froze, the mask slipping. Me? Don't insult me, I said, voice steady as steel. They trace the payments, the orders, the account. It's all in your name. He leaned back slowly, eyes darting, calculating. Mom, listen to me. It's not what it looks like. Then explain it. Because right now, it looks like you helped your wife poison me. He rubbed his temples, exhaling. I didn't help her. I was trying to stop her. I folded my arms. You expect me to believe that? She was spiraling, he said quickly. After Dad died, after the business started slipping, she thought the inheritance would fix everything. I found out what she was planning, but by then, she'd already taken the drug. I thought if I redirected the payments, I could track her, stop her. I was wrong. I searched his face for the boy I'd raised, the man I hoped he'd become. All I saw was fear, not of guilt, but of exposure. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd go to the police, he whispered, and I thought I could fix it quietly. By laundering evidence through your firm? By protecting this family. His voice cracked. I didn't want our name dragged through the mud. I didn't want Ava growing up with parents behind bars. You should have thought of that before letting her mother serve poison at my table. He looked away, jaw tight. So what happens now? Now? I said coldly. You face what you've built, just like she will. You'd ruin your own son, he spat. You think I'm the one ruining you? I stepped closer, eyes locked on his. You did that yourself. I turned and walked out before my resolve could shatter. Harris was waiting outside, leaning against his car. Well? He asked. He admitted everything, I said. Recordings? He lifted the small device tucked into his lapel. Every word. By nightfall, Daniel was in custody, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and financial misconduct. Sabrina's screams echoed through the corridor when she saw him led past her cell. Some called it tragedy. I called it symmetry. Days bled into weeks. Court dates, statements. Reporters camped outside my gate, hungry for headlines about betrayal and bloodlines. I ignored them all. Let the world dissect my family. I'd already done the autopsy. One evening, as I sat sorting documents for Harris, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, handwritten in trembling ink. Inside, a single page. Eleanor, you may think you've won, but some debts can't be erased. Ask yourself why the drug she used was so easy to find. Ask yourself who taught her to hide it. You're not the only one with secrets. A friend. My breath caught. I reread the words, each line colder than the last. If this wasn't from Daniel or Sabrina, then who? Harris examined it under the lamp, frowning. Postmarked from out of state. No fingerprints. Whoever wrote this knows too much. Could it be Sabrina's cousin? Maybe. Or someone higher up the chain. Someone who profits from silence. For days, paranoia shadowed me. Cars idling too long, strangers glancing twice. Even the mailman seemed to linger. Harris insisted on installing cameras, alarms, a security detail. But no system protects you from questions clawing at your own mind. What if the poison was just a test? What if I wasn't the target, but the witness they needed gone? The thought gnawed at me until one night, I returned home to find the front door ajar. My pulse spiked. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, except for the study. The safe was open, files scattered. Only one folder missing, the original copy of Robert's offshore accounts. Someone wanted history buried. I called Harris immediately. He arrived within minutes, scanning the room. No forced entry. Whoever did this had a key. I whispered the name before I could stop myself. Daniel. He shook his head. He's still in holding. Then who? Harris didn't answer. The next morning, Detective Shaw phoned with an update. The compound in that drug, we traced its batch number. It came from a restricted shipment flagged months ago during an investigation into pharmaceutical theft. The distributor's records lead to a private buyer. Name on the invoice, Eleanor Hayes. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. Maybe. Or maybe someone's framing you. After he hung up, I sat motionless. Whoever orchestrated this wanted me cornered, doubted, discredited, and they were getting closer. That evening, as rain drummed against the roof, a car pulled into the drive. Headlights cut through the mist. Harris wasn't due. Slowly, I opened the door. A woman stepped out, tall, composed, eyes sharp as razors. Mrs. Hayes? Yes. She extended a card. Agent Sullivan, Federal Bureau of Investigation. My stomach nodded. What do you want? To help, she said simply. We've been tracking a ring siphoning controlled substances through hospital networks. Your case intersected with ours. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, she unfolded a file. Photos, ledgers, names. Among them, Sabrina's cousin. She's part of a larger operation, Sullivan explained, supplying compounds to clients willing to pay for quiet solutions, inheritances, settlements, elder estates. And Daniel? I asked quietly. Unwitting investor, she said. His firm laundered proceeds without realizing the source, but when he discovered the truth, instead of reporting, he tried to conceal it. That's on him. I exhaled slowly. So this was bigger than us. Much bigger. But your quick thinking, switching the glass, contacting local law, gave us the trail we needed. She closed the folder. You've done more good than you know. Then why does it feel like loss? She met my eyes. Because justice always costs something. When she left, I stood alone again, surrounded by silence. But this time, it was a silence I'd earned. Weeks later, the trials began. Sabrina pled guilty, her composure shattered, tears staining designer cuffs. Daniel accepted a plea: financial restitution, community service, a fractured reputation. The cousin cooperated, trading names for leniency. The network collapsed. And me? I rebuilt. Slowly, deliberately. The poison that once nearly ended me became the catalyst that freed me. From illusion, dependence, and the fragile myth of family perfection. On the anniversary of that cursed retirement party, I hosted another gathering. This one smaller. Neighbors, friends, Harris at my side. No champagne, just coffee and laughter that reached the corners of the house again. When someone asked how I managed to survive such betrayal, I smiled. By remembering that love without truth is just performance, and performances always end. As the evening faded, I walked into the garden, the air crisp with promise. The stars shimmered above, indifferent yet eternal. Somewhere beyond those lights, consequences unfolded, cells closed, verdicts rendered, lessons learned too late. I raised my cup to the sky. To survival, I whispered. Because survival wasn't luck. It was clarity. It was courage. It was choosing, again and again, to live. Not as someone's victim, but as the author of my own ending. And if the world ever tried to write me out again, I'd switch more than a glass. I'd rewrite the entire story. In the months that followed the trials, the storm finally began to quiet, though silence never truly felt like peace, more like the pause between thunderclaps. The papers had moved on, the cameras vanished, and strangers no longer whispered my name like a cautionary tale. But healing, I discovered, wasn't linear. It was a map drawn in pencil, erased and redrawn as new truths emerged. Some mornings I woke steady, grateful. Others, the weight of betrayal settled heavy, reminding me that wounds might close, but the scars stayed, etched deep beneath the surface. Yet even scars, I realized, could be rewritten, not as marks of pain, but proof of survival. With Harris's encouragement, I began turning my ordeal into purpose. Together, we founded the Hayes Foundation for Truth and Accountability, offering legal aid to victims of financial manipulation and familial abuse. For every widow deceived, every mother cast aside, every woman silenced by greed, we became a voice, and in helping others find justice, I reclaimed pieces of myself that betrayal had stolen. Reporters reached out again, but this time, I chose the narrative. Interviews weren't about scandal, but strength. Not about poison, but perseverance. I spoke not as a victim, but as a woman reborn through fire, tempered, not broken. Still, in quiet hours, my thoughts drifted to Daniel. He'd completed his sentence, 18 months reduced for cooperation, and was now rebuilding somewhere upstate, far from the city that once applauded his ambition. He wrote occasionally, brief letters, careful words. "I'm sorry," they always began. I never responded. Some bridges, once burned, become memorials rather than crossings. Sabrina's messages, fewer and more fragile, arrived through her lawyer. "I've changed," she claimed. Perhaps she had. But forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't about granting access. It was about releasing the hold of anger. And though I no longer hated her, I couldn't invite her back into a life she'd tried to end. The past was a closed chapter, referenced, but never reopened. One autumn evening, as amber leaves whispered across the driveway, I found myself returning to the community center where the foundation held its first seminar. The theme, Reclaiming Power After Betrayal. Women gathered in folding chairs, eyes bright with pain and defiance. Some were mothers disowned by ungrateful children. Others, wives discarded after decades of devotion. Each carried stories heavy enough to sink ships, yet here they were, afloat, unbroken. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped to the podium, hands steady, voice calm. "When someone tries to erase you," I began, "remember, Their attempt says more about their fear than your worth. People betray what they don't understand. They destroy what they can't control. But control is an illusion, and truth always outlives deceit. Faces lifted, hope flickering like candles in the dark. I once believed family meant forever, I continued. But forever is earned, not entitled. Love without respect is possession, and possession isn't love. It's theft. Applause swelled, soft but sincere. Afterward, a young woman approached, eyes glistening. "My mother sold my house while I was overseas," she whispered. "Said it was for my own good. I thought I'd never trust again. But hearing you, I know I can start over." I squeezed her hand gently. "Starting over isn't weakness," I said. "It's the bravest thing you can do." Walking home that night, under a sky washed clean by rain, I realized my story had become more than vengeance. It was a roadmap, a testament that even shattered things can shine if held to the light. Yet just as I began to settle into that peace, the past came knocking once more. Literally. 3 sharp raps at the door. Harris was out of town at a conference. The hour was late, the street quiet. Through the frosted glass I saw a silhouette, tall, familiar. I opened the door cautiously. Daniel. He stood there, thinner, older, remorse carved into every line of his face. "Mom," he said softly. "Can I come in?" For a long moment, I hesitated. Then, slowly, I stepped aside. Inside, the house felt smaller, the air thick with memories. He glanced around. The new photographs, the framed certificate from the foundation, the empty chair where Robert once sat. "You've done well," he murmured. "You built something good out of all that pain." I folded my arms. "Why are you here, Daniel?" He exhaled, eyes downcast. "Because apologies in ink mean nothing. I needed to say it to your face." "And what is it you think you need to say?" "That I was wrong. About Sabrina. About the money. About everything. I thought success meant control. That control meant safety. But I lost sight of the people I was trying to protect. I lost sight of you." His voice cracked, raw. "I let greed and fear turn me into someone you wouldn't recognize. I wanted to fix it quietly, but all I did was make more noise." I studied him. The boy who once built tree houses, now a man who'd torn down trust. "You hurt me, Daniel," I said quietly. "Not just with what you did, but with what you didn't do. The silence, the complicity. You stood by while the woman you married tried to kill me." Tears welled in his eyes. "I know, and I'll live with that every day. But please, Mom, don't let my worst moment define me forever." I turned away, staring at the portrait above the mantel. Robert in uniform, steady, strong. "You sound like your father," I whispered. He believed redemption came through action, not words. "Then let me prove it," Daniel said. "I want to help the foundation. I want to use what I know, the business, the networks, to protect others from people like me." I was silent for a long time. Finally, I nodded once. "Help, not for me, but for them, the women who need it. And understand this. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. It's release. You'll earn trust, if ever, through consistency, not confession." He nodded, eyes bright with gratitude. When he left, the house felt lighter, as if a lingering ghost had finally been named. Over the following months, Daniel made good on his promise. He worked quietly, humbly, behind the scenes, helping restructure cases, connect victims with resources, expose fraud hidden in fine print. Slowly, the foundation flourished. And though I never called him son again, I began cautiously to call him Daniel without bitterness. As for me, I learned that closure isn't a door slamming shut, but a window opening toward something better. Life returned to rhythm. Morning tea, garden walks, evening reflections by the fire. Yet one final letter arrived, months later, written in the same trembling hand as before. Eleanor, truth is a circle. You think you've reached the end, but it always curves back. Look closer at the ledger in Robert's safe. Not every secret died with him. A friend. My hands trembled as I unfolded the hidden compartment beneath the drawer. There, between worn envelopes, lay a ledger I'd never noticed, filled with names, dates, transactions, all too familiar. Among them, Harris. My breath caught. Betrayal, it seemed, was a language the universe spoke fluently. I sat for a long time, staring at the ink that threatened to unravel the piece I'd built. Then, slowly, I closed the book. Not every truth demands pursuit. Some lessons are best left as warnings, not wounds reopened. I'd fought too hard to live free of ghosts to chase another. Instead, I locked the ledger away and stepped into the sunlight, where new beginnings waited. Because in the end, revenge is not the act of destruction, but the art of becoming untouchable. Not through cruelty, but clarity. I was no longer the woman who toasted at a retirement party poisoned with deceit. I was the architect of my own tomorrow, unbroken, unbowed, and beautifully alive. And as the wind stirred the chimes on the porch, carrying their song into the golden dusk, I whispered to no one and everyone, "Thank you." For every betrayal had been a lesson, every lie, a mirror, every loss, a door. And behind this final door, I had found not vengeance, but victory. If this story touched your heart or gave you strength, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because every week we share stories of women who turned betrayal into power. Your story might be next.